Good morning, everybody. So I think we're going to start. I understand the plenary is running a little bit late, but we probably won't just to get going. Thanks so much for your interest in this talk. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and share with you some thoughts on a topic I'm very, very passionate about. And this is the role of education in addressing the biggest intergenerational equity injustice of all times, which is addressing climate change. Intergenerational equity is, in essence, the principle of sound stewardship and distributed justice, one that calls for fairness and equity between generations past, present, and future in utilizing resources. I'm a mother of two wonderful boys, a 3.5-year-old and a 1-year-old. And every day I think of them when I do what I do. And I want them to have a sound future, a sustainable future, and I want that future for all the children in the planet. I have been working on this issue of climate change for more than 15 years. And even though we have certainly made tremendous progress, think, for example, the stunning increase of wind and solar generation worldwide, there is still a huge, huge amount to do. I'm privileged to have the opportunity to dedicate my professional life to a topic I'm so passionate about. I'm the Executive Director for Climate Change at the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, based in London, one of the private philanthropic organizations largest in the world, with $4 billion in the endowment. We dedicate about $250 million a year on charitable causes, and about a third of that on climate-related causes. I'm also a member of the jury of the Teacher Prize, and today we are launching the Climate Change Education Alliance, of which I'm a co-chair. But first, you may wonder why a children's foundation works on climate change issues. I get that question all the time. And it's because we believe that every child deserves to survive and thrive today and in the future. And to achieve this, it makes sense to invest in improving children's nutrition, health, and education, at the same time as working to protect a sustainable planet for our children and future generations. As a private philanthropy, we work with partners to bring the best of science, business, and policy making to what we all know are very complex challenges. Children are the most vulnerable to changes in our climate, despite being the least responsible for its causes. For example, ambient air pollution caused by coal used in the power sector or vehicles on the road has major ramifications for health, and very importantly for our children. Also, over 500 million children are living in areas with extremely high levels of flood occurrence, and nearly 160 million live in areas of high or extremely high drought severity. Imagine the political instability this could cause if they were to be displaced. And they are going to be displaced if we don't do anything about climate. By comparison, the Syrian crisis has prompted only 5 million refugees and 6 million internally displaced, with 1 million seeking refuge in Europe. So given the overwhelming scientific evidence on the dangers and causes of climate change, failing to take action is, in my view, an injustice to children. We also know that providing a climate-safe future promises multiple benefits today, such as cleaner air, energy security, and better jobs for the future generations. So what do we have to do? The best of science tells us that climate security requires net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. That's 33 years from now. My children will be younger in 2050 that I am today, standing here. It is very, very close. So what does net zero greenhouse gas emissions mean? This means that the world captures as much CO2 from the atmosphere through reforestation or carbon capture and storage as we are emitting through fossil fuels. The International Energy Agency just released some data just yesterday, and for 3 years in a row, the global emissions worldwide have stabilized, which means that even for the first time, we see that we can grow economically and at the same time not increase our emissions. But stabilization is not enough. We need to get to that net zero by the second half of the century. So really the actions of the next 30 years are absolutely crucial for putting us on a path that avoids the worst outcomes. Our grandchildren generations will have to live with the consequences of our actions or inactions. So our children, my children, they need to be educated to become ecological citizens and not citizens of the market. At the moment, our children will be educated as if everything is going to continue the same. There are no interdisciplinary courses that teach them and prepare them to choose and shape a future that is climate friendly. In effect, our education system locks them into our current fossil fuel-based society. We need to teach our children empathy towards the natural world. In December of 2015 in Paris, governments worldwide gathered in Paris and agreed for the very first time to a universal agreement to do just that, to get us to a net zero carbon society by 2050. And therefore charted a new course based on the understanding that it is in everyone's national interest to do what is best for the common good. We know that climate change carries no passport, and emissions blow across borders and impacts transcend national boundaries. It is our collective problem. However, in reality, the world is far from meeting its own objectives unless we all embrace the transformation that is required and we keep governments to account to what they agreed to do in December 2015. So how do we do that? What is the role of the education sector? So I think so far, as you can see, all my career has been on climate and now in philanthropy. So I'm not an educator. And from my perspective, the philanthropic and the civil society community advocating for climate-friendly policies worldwide, we have primarily focused in using economic, technical arguments as to why moving from, for example, fossil fuels to renewables made sense. And these have worked quite well in the sense we got a universal agreement as a result. And we have achieved tremendous progress. In the UAE, for example, where we are today, they achieved the lowest ever cost of solar generation in the world. That was completely unthinkable only a few years ago. However, really to get from that stabilization of emissions to net zero by 2050, which is where we will need to get to, we need to go much faster, much deeper. We need to create that social contagion. And for that, we need to connect both intellectually and emotionally with people. There needs to be a sense of shared purpose and excitement for the future. No doubt it will be hard, but this may be humanity's finest hour. I'm convinced we need to go much deeper, beyond the rational arguments for action, and the education community has a crucial role to play, in my view. We need expert communicators, teachers, that translate the obscure technical arguments into understandable truths. Only if we can make climate change solutions teachable, comprehensible, we will have a chance at accelerating and seeing the transformational change that we need to see in the world. First, we really need to speak honestly about the gravity of climate change and not shy away from hard truths, including our own responsibility for the crisis we face. This includes increasing climate literacy for all ages, but especially for the young generation. We need to give them agency to advocate for the future they want. Most of us don't connect the dots between driving our cars, flying across the world, and the rising sea levels of the shores of Bangladesh, the drought of Somalia, or a child in Beijing dying from a respiratory illness. And that's a big part of the problem. Our society has a profound disconnect between our actions and the consequences for other people and the planet. We all live, let's admit it, a fossil fuel lifestyle, I myself included. And therefore, all of us need to be part of the solution. We can only be part of the solution if we are aware of the problem and understand the solutions. And not only understand them, but they become part of our daily life. There is no better advocate than a child with its parents. If my child says, like, don't throw something, I will not throw it. But the education sector, therefore, is ideally placed to disseminate this knowledge. We need to empower our children and youth to demand the solutions that we know today exist, while equipping them for a changing world. So the first step is awareness and truth-telling. The trick here, of course, is to speak truthfully, but not paralyze people, and especially children. There has been a tendency, in my view, to talk about climate to children, and as a result, we scare them. That's not the point. It's a fine balance that we need to find between telling them what is really happening, but also equipping them to make the decisions that they need to make to deal with the situation. But how do we convey the urgency and gravity of the climate challenge while still motivating people to act? Or how do you do that with children without starting an intergenerational warfare? I've been struggling with this dilemma for more than a decade, and now even more as a mother of two. How do I convey the profound feeling of loss and sadness I feel every day for the irreparable damage that humanity is inflicting to our natural world? How do I explain to my two boys that millions of peoples may be displaced around the world and may lose their homes while we comfortably live in London? How can I accept that there are people that are actively working against changing any of this and will lock a miserable future for my children and your children? The clock is ticking. Nature doesn't wait or negotiate. The world has already warmed up by a degree, and we see the consequences. So if we are to truly do what is necessary to avoid the worst impacts, then we will need to mobilize society as never before. We will need leaders of all ages to demonstrate courage and perseverance in putting our societies on a safer, more sustainable pathway. We will need faith and community leaders, artists, musicians, writers, filmmakers, but very importantly, teachers, who can tap into our collective psyche and remind us of what we love, what is at stake, and what is worth fighting for. During my professional life, although I totally recognize the systemic nature of the climate change problem, I primarily approach my work as a technical issue, as I said, that could be resolved by engineers, economists, I'm an economist, and policymakers informed by sound evidence. We have the technical solutions and the policies. But wow, now we need a generational and cultural transformation. Knowledge is power. That's why climate education is so critical to securing the well-being of the world's youth and that of future generations. I would really love to see the climate and the education community joining hands so that our children and youth are empowered by truth and knowledge and can decide not only what they want to be in life, but what sort of society they want to live in. The Climate Change Education Alliance, I hope, that we are launching today, will be the beginning of that conversation on how do we empower our children to be the stewards of our planet by becoming the truly empathic leaders and ecological citizens of tomorrow. Thank you. And now I think we are open for some questions, if there are any questions.
You talked a lot about the problem, and we understand about how serious climate change is. But what are some practical strategies that you teach the people that you work with? I think everyone heard, yes?
Can you introduce yourself? Would you mind?
I'm Valerie. I'm principal of a school in China.
So there are lots of practical solutions. It depends on at what level we need to implement them. For a national government or a state or a city or school, there will be different strategies. There is not a one silver bullet that will fix the whole problem. This is a systemic issue. We have created our society in the last 200 years to fit fossil fuels at the center of it. So it is not only about introducing a carbon price, which it is. You could teach about what it looks like. It's not only about building codes for buildings and making them passive or net zero, but it is. It's about compact design of our cities, but not only. It's about increasing public transport and using them more effectively. It's about how you think about when you are going to take a plane, whether you need to take it or not. It is all of it and more. My point of here today was that I don't think there is enough climate literacy about what the problem is and what the solutions are and what everyone can do about it. But most importantly, how are we keeping, as a society, our governments to account on the pledges that they have made? It's not a technocratic issue. It's the responsibility of all society to say, this is what you have said you will do, this is now what we want to see. And then you can go into the technical solutions of doing roadmaps and analysis and understanding of what needs to be done, which will be specific to the setting. Yeah, that's, and your name is? Wonderful. So the question is, what is the Climate Change Education Alliance, and if you can say a little bit more about it. So it is an initiative of the Barkey Foundation. They set up alliances in various topics. So I have been asked to co-chair one that is called Climate Change Education. My other co-chair is sitting on the front row, Leo from the World Resources Institute. We're launching it today, so we have a really good group with representation from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Education Commission, OECD, two teachers that have been in the top 50 practitioners, one that lives close to the Arctic, the other one that has a school in the Amazon. So a very diverse group. And we need to decide today on where the practical outputs of the conversation. But we see it as a starting point of bringing more discussion between climate practitioners and education practitioners of what can be done to create more of a narrative that the education sector can deploy when trying to deal with the climate change issue, not only increasing climate literacy, but also preparing in terms of skills and behavior, the generation of the future. Those that will be, as I argued earlier, will be good stewards of the resources, will be active solution seekers, and will be truly ecological citizens and not held hostage by the society that we have created over the last 150 years, which is no longer fit for purpose.
Do you have any programs for schools? Is there anything in place, or I think is it coming in the near future so that it could help us out?
So I think the purpose of the alliance we'll have to discuss. I don't think it is about creating a specific syllabus for schools. Not necessarily, although that could be an output that comes out. I know that there is a number of schools that are already testing a few things. What we want to see is that it's not only one school or two schools or 5 schools or 10 schools, is that the education system across the world embrace this as principles so you can develop it. And then education practitioners can go and develop the syllabus.
How long do you see that happening?
Well, hopefully very soon, but it is not something that within the alliance will need to do. It's definitely something that we advocate the world needs to get going. It could be a part of the alliance is that some of the outputs that we road test some of that syllabus in a couple of schools that are represented in the group. But again, it's a lot more about the leverage and the narrative that needs to be brought to bear so we can really see the change that is necessary. Great. So I think we actually then caught up with time. Thank you so much.